New details that are surrounding Pete Alonso's free agency are shocking, and this could be the reason why he's still out on the market right now. In this latest True Mets Talk podcast episode, we are talking about the latest report from Bob Nightingale and talking about some potential first base alternatives for the New York Mets if it gets to that point. Let's get into it. Hey, what's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy CP, and we are talking more Pete Alonso as some new interesting updates and reports are coming out regarding the situation between Alonso and Scott Boras. We'll take a look at the latest report from Bob Nightingale. Before we do, please do smash those like buttons on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more updates and content from this New York Mets offseason as we are surging ahead into the 2025 regular season opening day. I'm getting ahead of myself. Spring training first, and then opening day right around the corner. And as always, please let me know in the comment section what you all think about this latest report. And it is as such. Bob Nightingale is reporting, quote unquote, and this was also seen on SNY's X account in an article stating that from Bob Nightingale, Scott Boras is reportedly using Prince Fielder's 9-year, $214 million contract as a comparison for what Pete Alonso should get in free agency. This is what Scott Boras is going around to teams and their negotiations and using as a benchmark, which is absolutely ridiculous. We know that there are a handful of teams still interested in Pete Alonso. We also know that there are a lot of teams that passed up on Pete Alonso while needing a first baseman in order to go a different route because presumably this asking price has been on the table from day one. Now, the Mets have had numerous generous offers out there to Pete Alonso. Last offseason, a nice 7-year deal for around $158 million. Now, this offseason, somewhere in the ballpark of 3 years, $90 million with some opt outs. But if Scott Boras and Pete Alonso are going around to the Mets, to the Angels, to the Giants, asking for anywhere near a 9-year deal, let alone maybe 8 or 7, because that's even still too much, then this Pete Alonso saga is going to be going on for quite some time. And that gives a very good description and it gives very good detail as to why he has not signed with a team just yet. Now, I don't know if this is a Pete Alonso problem or a Scott Boras problem, if we can differentiate between the two. All that we know from this update is that this is what Scott Boras is saying. We don't know if he's getting fed information from Alonso. We don't know if he's directing Alonso to just hold still in this market. But again, this is a huge problem in terms of the Mets potentially shifting their focus elsewhere, whether it's Bregman or whether it's to other first base alternatives this offseason in hopes of replicating and replacing potentially Pete Alonso. Now, I'm not saying it's going to get to that point, and I'm not saying that it is at that point already, but as we progress further into this offseason, we need to start thinking about alternatives if their price point in years and dollar value are going to remain true. So let's take a look at two alternatives, one more likely than the other, but we'll get into that right now. All right, Pete Alonso alternatives right now in this offseason. Again, as I just said, one more likely than the other. If you've been paying attention to numerous reports out in Toronto, coming out of the Blue Jays organization, you all know that this situation between Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Toronto Blue Jays, as they kind of talk about contract extensions, could end in a little bit of turmoil given what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. wants in terms of a dollar figure in his next deal. Now, there are multiple reports out there stating that both sides, Guerrero Jr. and the Toronto Blue Jays, have been unable to come to a contract agreement as of right now. And if it were me just estimating about that situation and the current state of the Toronto Blue Jays, their failures over the last couple of seasons, their failures to also bring in free agents externally when they have the money, and free agents just passing up the opportunity to go to Toronto could create a situation where they cut ties with Guerrero Jr. and try to maximize their potential in a trade, whether it's this offseason or at the trade deadline. I will say, I know that there's a lot of other content creators and a lot of other reporters talking about this situation as well. And I'm not saying that it's not one to monitor, but I'm saying it is still unlikely to happen. And you couple that with the fact that the Toronto Blue Jays aren't going to give him up for free, and they're going to, again, want to maximize that return, giving a team a full year's worth of control and potential ability to negotiate a contract in season if Guerrero Jr. and his camp wish to do that and go down that route. Um, Again, I've been saying this and I'm going to still hold true that I don't think Vlad Guerrero Jr. gets traded to the Mets this offseason. Now, with this Pete Alonso situation, can the Mets front office shift their focus? Yes, absolutely. But as we saw this past go around with Juan Soto, right, and the Yankees trading for him only to end up being a rental and end up in the Mets organization this offseason, regardless, this could be the same situation that we're looking at from the Mets perspective and why they could be hesitant to trade for Guerrero Jr. in this offseason rather than just waiting for him to become a free agent. Now, again, Juan Soto and Scott Boras, they were very adamant from the start that they weren't going to negotiate in season. I don't think we've heard anything about Vlad Guerrero Jr. and his willingness to do that versus not, but that's something to monitor in terms of an actual comparison there in the situation. And I know a lot of Mets fans would rather just wait it out and be one of the top bidders instead of sending a package that is hefty to an already kind of struggling farm system that's kind of in the middle of the road based off of Baseball America's recent farm system rankings. I think the Mets were around 16th or 17th in those rankings. And when you're talking about a package for Vladdy, you know, you're talking about a 26-year-old phenom at this point coming off of a season, a career season with 44 doubles, an on-base percentage just under 400, and an OPS well over 900. He is a premier talent, and it's going to take premier talent to give up in order to get. And you're talking about a package that probably starts with a Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, and not or, and Ryan Clifford. So the thinking process from there can shift towards maybe the Mets get a stopgap first baseman to try to cover their bases and also go after another bat, potentially covering the DH spot, potentially an Anthony Santander, as we've talked about in the last week or two of this offseason. And that stopgap first baseman is Yandy Diaz. And I've mentioned Yandy Diaz's name in a previous episode, as we talked about Pete Alonso about over a month ago, when we still were kind of in a predicament in terms of what his outlook was truly going to be. And I mentioned him being a possibility via trade between the Mets and the Tampa Bay Rays, two organizations that have traded with each other a lot in recent memory, especially over the last couple of seasons. No trades have really been significant of sorts. And this would be the first significant trade between the two organizations as of recent. But again, this is totally on the table because you take a look at the contract for Yandy Diaz, it's very advantageous. And you're not going to be, he's not a rental, first of all. He can be a rental for cheap because his total contract and what he has left is 2 years, $22 million. The first year in 2025 being for $10 million, but there's a club option attached. So, you know, if the Mets choose to go after full throttle Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next offseason, they could cut ties with Yandy Diaz. If they fail to go ahead, or if they do get Santander on board this offseason, but if they don't address the DH position this year, they have Yandy Diaz as a stopgap as a first baseman this year. If they decide to go after Vladdy again, they can exercise that club option and keep him around for that second year, in which Yandy Diaz would be making $12 million. So again, there's an opportunity for Diaz's contract to be 1 year for $10 million or 2 years for $22 million, which is a ton of flexibility. In addition to a very flexible contract that could be present for the New York Mets with Yandy Diaz, as a stopgap position player, Yandy Diaz is everything you would want in hopes of replacing Pete Alonso for a single season. Yes, some of the power metrics went down with Yandy Diaz from 2023 to 2024. He went from 22 home runs to only 14. The OPS dipped to about 755. But again, he provides you that ability to go gap to gap with 31 doubles hit. The on base percentage is awesome and was awesome in 2024 at 341. And he hit for a 281 average. So for those of you all who love batting average and put a lot of stock into it, there is your 281 batting average compared to Pete Alonso's batting average. Now, I'm not trying to sell you all that Yandy Diaz is as powerful as a hitter or as good as a hitter as Pete Alonso. All I'm saying is that he is an established, proven veteran at 33 going on 34 years old. He has the ability to provide you a solid glove for a single season in 2025, and he has the ability with the flexible contract to transition into a platoon DH or a very inexpensive bench bat option at only $12 million for the 2026 season. Now, both of these options would be trades. You don't have the free agents of the world to fall back on, like your Goldschmidts, who went to the Yankees, or your Christian Walkers, who went to the Astros, or any other option like a Nathaniel Lowe via trade that went to the Washington Nationals. So this first baseman alternative market is getting very thin. You have two options right here for the New York Mets. And I will say, if you've been paying attention to the True Mets Talk podcast and everything that I've been talking about on this channel, you all know as well as anybody, I want Pete Alonso back in this organization, and I want him back on the New York Mets because I think that he has a lot to offer, especially more so than what he put up in the regular season of 2024. But quite simply, judging his market, given the other competitors that are also in on Pete Alonso right now, there is no reason to give him anything north of a 4-year deal. Zero reason. And if we take a look at this quote, going back to this quote by Scott Boras, in trying to compare Pete Alonso to Prince Fielder's 9-year, $214 million deal, albeit it was just under $24 million AAV. There's nobody in this league right now that is prepared to give Pete Alonso a long-term deal. And it's certainly not the New York Mets, or else it would have happened already. So Mets fans, let me know what you think. Does Pete Alonso end up being a New York Met? I tossed a community poll tab poll on the channel last night asking you all what you think the Pete Alonso contract is going to look like with whichever respective team he ends up with, particularly the New York Mets. Let me know, smash those thumbs up buttons, and we'll continue to monitor the situation until the next episode or live stream. It's your boy CP. Peace out.